Hello everyone. So we are here with Mr. Joachim Hensch, who's from Joachim Hensch Consulting, and he presented a case study on Smart Factory League Summit on the topic Transformers 4.0, and he was talking about how to build the workforce that you need in the future. So welcome, Joachim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so please tell us a little bit about the experience you had on the summit.
Yes, so the summit is actually a good combination of different topics around the overarching topic of Industry 4.0. We talk about technology here, but we also talk about the processes, about the changes, about the emotions from people in this change. So I think it's a good overall summary of the topics that are influencing the digital transformation.
Yeah, great, good to know that. And so if you could share a little bit about what you do at your consulting and what Joachim Hensch Consulting as a whole does for the industry.
Yeah, so I was 37 years employed so far. I'm quite new. I'm quite new in this endeavor, and I left corporate last year because I realized that that more and more companies need this digital transformation that we did in the Izmir factory of Hugo Boss. And I thought that the best way to do that now is to set up a kind of inverted classroom course. So I'm not doing a regular consulting as you might think. I'm rather doing education, let's say, but with a very practical approach. So I help companies on their digital transformation, some with mentoring, some with real digital transformation activities. But it basically is about the digital transformation, but it's a very personalized case-to-case job to do.
I see. And so in this case, I think I can call you an effective leader in the industry.
I hope so.
And yeah, I think this skill set or let's just say the broadness of the specializations of the consulting documents, I think it will improve going much ahead into the future. So talking about effective leaders, in your case study, you mentioned some categories and kinds of effective leaders. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes. So what I learned, my last role in Izmir was managing director. So basically, you could say I was the top of the pyramid of this organization with 4,000 people, and I was reporting to the CEO, and he always said like, okay, you can make a lot of changes if you say like. Everyone on my command, like that is, and it is not actually true. It is from the power play. It is true that if you're on top, if you're working as a top leader, you can say what to do. But actually, to be honest, we as top leaders, we don't know what's actually happening in organizations, and that requires a different set of leadership because we have, in terms of this control. When it comes to these transformations, you have to add a lot of trust into your organization, which means like you have to come from a control-based leadership into a trust-based leadership. So you give a lot of responsibility and accountability to lower levels, even to the regular operators. So you give trust, you earn accountability, and that requires a different skill set when it comes to leadership. So you have these thought leaders who are really thinking broadly about the future, like what is the reason to exist in 5 years' time. You need big, bold ideas on that. And you have the first-line managers who give a lot of trust to their subordinates to let them do this transformation. And that is a different approach on leadership. And you need all of them. If you have no control, it's going to be a disaster. And if you have only control, it's going to be too slow. And you have no room for experiment.
Yeah.
So that is why I said for this transformation, you need different leaders in different positions.
True. And like you explained, I totally agree with that because trust is something which could be, to give a sort of a funny analogy, it could be like the cheese slice or the lettuce between the different layers of sandwiches, and those different layers are the different layers of the management. And I recall in your presentation you were mentioning that you had a client in Sri Lanka where there were 13 different layers of
14
management.
actually,
14. Yeah. So yeah, I can totally understand the value of trust in this case. So thank you for your input on that thing.
Yeah.
And if I speak about organizations, and you were talking about fluid organizations, so what is the key to fluid organizations? So
fluidity is something that approached me when I was at a conference in San Francisco, and we were talking very much about innovation. And in 2017, I visited Tesla And so I was very much intrigued by this openness at Tesla for innovation and innovative ideas. And then I came back into the factory and I thought, okay, but if we are too much thinking on our to-dos, we cannot see what's left and right. So one thing is the openness to look left and right with your peers, and also up and down what's happening in organizations. That's one thing. But then also we live in a very fluctuating time. Like we can hardly predict nowadays what's coming in the future. So we have to be more flexible, which means like in one season I was in apparel, so in one season we did more trousers, and in the other season we did more jackets. So if you have a fixed and rigid organization, you cannot fulfill the capacities because you say, sorry, this is my capacity, and the others have nothing to do, and these people are overwhelmed. So we said, no, this is not good. This is going nowhere. We have to be more fluid so that we see each other's needs according to the market demands, because we exist as producers because the market wants something. And said, we have to give up with this rigid management structures, and we have to be more fluid and see what's going on. Okay. This is not so easy to clearly say that. It requires a different skill set, an openness from managers, but also you need to cross-train managers in different skills so that you can apply this fluidity.
And in a bold way, like you said.
Absolutely, in a bold way. There's no one out of this equation. Absolutely.
Yeah. And speaking about the dynamic list of experiences that you have, and thank you for sharing your experience at Tesla. And that reminds me of another experience you had in one of the master classes at Lego.
Yes.
So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, Lego was astounding for me because I love this. They have an innovation lab, a group that is constantly traveling around the world and making observations how people play with Lego, how they play.
Right.
And for example, they had a very harsh landing with declining sales, and they were thinking like, who is my competitor? And they realized that the 10-year-old kids were not playing instead of Lego with Mattel or with toys or others. They were actually using a smartphone. So their biggest competitor was not in their industry, it was something completely different. So they had to learn how to cope with that, and they integrated learning and working, and they created an app, and so they had a physical Lego brick and a digital design feature like an app, and you can put this together. And they had this team that is that is constantly poking the organization, and they called themselves Smart Rebels. And I love this. Like, you have a mature organization and you have these rebels that are smart enough to not become pirates, because pirates get killed, but to constantly poke the organization towards the future, and always telling them, listen guys, we have to be careful with what we do now, because it may turn out that it is not the success of tomorrow. So that is something like building a system building a rebel system in an organization, as crazy as it sounds, but a system that is consistently poking the organization and tweaking it bit by bit, not shaking it like a revolution, but consistently poking it. And we did this also. When I came back from Lego, I immediately started building this with my leadership team, and we used it until I left. It is a very impactful thought from Lego.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And I would say that's an interesting input there, because like you mentioned, Lego had to take not just inspirations from other industries, but to see why their end users are so addicted to that. So this is like a completely different level of challenge, because there are industries who look for who look for inspiration from different industries. For example, automotive looks for inspiration from aerospace, for example. But it's on the same line. It has to be on the same synchronization eventually. They just need to find out why this and this technology is going to help the industry. But for Lego, it was a completely different kind of challenge, as I see.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an interesting point in there. And just the last bit, during your presentation, you also mentioned about not really, trying to be perfect all the time, but focusing more on taking actions.
Yes.
And the world knows Germans to be perfect, efficient, maybe fluidly perfect, if I could say that.
Yeah.
So you being, and you've been working for a German company for so long, and you being German yourself, so how is this how is this idea in your head? Wasn't it like a disruption for you in your normal working style, or how do you look at it?
Yes. So let me say it that way. I said stop being perfect, but I don't say stop perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
So there is clearly there must be a dedication to deliver something to the customer that the customer wants, and the customer's perception must always be like this is a perfect device, product, or whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with internal organizations is that we fall in love so much with our internal knowledge that we want to have everything perfect. The processes, the product, the details. We always tend to over-deliver something to our customers, which the customer will never recognize. And the problem with perfection is that you're too slow. We live in a time nowadays that in apparel industry, we don't have 2 seasons anymore. We have daily new offers from brands coming and approaching consumers. So the idea of perfecting something for 6 months and then putting it online or into the stores is simply too slow. That doesn't mean that the product should be like not fulfilling customers' demands, but it clearly says like really understand where you need perfectionism and where you don't need it, and where you don't need it because it is not paid or not valued, or it is making you slow, skip it, cut it. There was an interview recently from Elon Musk, and he said, if you don't have to add back 10%, you're not cutting enough in the first place.
Right.
And that's an interesting thought, you know. Like we always create buffers in organizations, you know, and this is like a perfectionism. Because we want to be perfect, we create these buffers, but buffers are making the organization slow and rigid. So if you take away this, then you live with the consequence that sometimes things are not 100% okay, but the majority is so much faster and so much more well that you ultimately succeed. And that is what I like. You know, people were laughing about Tesla when they started building cars in tents. But I mean, he gave. I would be rude to say that, but he was really like not caring at all about the presses and people talking about tents and building cars in tents, because he wanted to achieve the delivery. He wanted to have the quarterly numbers, and he achieved and he delivered. No matter where it was produced, in a perfectly built factory or in a tent. And that is what I mean. If you have an idea and you have a clear vision or a clear statement, let's say coming back to Smart Factory League here, if you have an idea about a digital twin, you don't necessarily have to replace manual sensors with digital sensors in the first place. As long as you have access to the information, to the data that you want to have from this point. If even you put a camera on a manual sensor that makes pictures of this, it doesn't matter, because it is about the function and not about the perfection around it. And that is something that is especially important when in digital transformations, when factories or organizations have to transform themselves, because they cannot know in the beginning how this will look at the end. So it's better to experiment and to make progress than to make a huge plan and then wait.
Great. So thank you, Mr. Joachim, for all the valuable inputs you gave.
Pleasure.
And we are really, really happy as a team that you really enjoyed the summit here and you took some valuable points back home with you. So hopefully we can see some applications in the industry in the near future about the discussions that we'll have here. And we also look forward to you joining us next year.
Thank you.
So
thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. And that was Mr. Joachim Hensch from Joachim Hensch Consulting.
Thanks.